Hi everybody. So I'm very clearly not in the Lighthouse Cafe kitchen right now. It's actually the end of the day and I'm back at home. I did a video this morning to put together a recipe for you, and I've now just realized that I never did an intro to let you know what I was doing. So here I am. If all of a sudden you see like a dog running around, it's no big deal. But yeah, so I wanted to do another recipe today with you. One of the items that I've discovered as I'm going through grocery stores and talking to other people, so I know it's not just my poor luck that I can't find it, but yeast is really hard to come by in grocery stores right now. But one of the things that I absolutely love is fresh bread. It is one of my favorite things. I would probably take that over dessert. So I got thinking, okay, what's something else that I can do? And I came across a recipe a few months back to do beer bread, and I've tried it. This one's actually a little bit different than what I've done, but I love it. And so I wanted to share it with you. It's something really simple. If you don't have yeast, this is the perfect bread to do. And in fact, if you're actually just starting to learn how to make bread, this one might be the easiest option for you to do as well, because you don't need to knead it. Literally, you just mix all the ingredients and you throw it in your pan and you bake it. It's fantastic. Depending upon your taste, you can use whatever kind of beer you want. If you are not a big fan of beer, don't shy away from this recipe yet, because it actually is not overly strong in beer flavor unless you use a really strong flavored beer. I've made it for my mom, who is not a beer drinker at all, and she really enjoys it. So that's got to count for something. I don't know. But again, we're in self-isolation right now, so you might as well get creative, try something new, right? So grab your beer. If you haven't had the rest of it since doing your homeschooling this week, I don't know how your kids are treating you, but grab a beer, find a beer from a neighbor if you don't keep beer on hand, and let's make some bread. That's how they roll. All right, so we're gonna get started on our bread here. What I've got in this bowl is just 3 cups of flour, just regular all-purpose flour. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some baking powder and salt. So I've got a tablespoon of baking powder in here, as well as 1 teaspoon of salt. If you don't have all-purpose flour, because I know that that's hard to come by right now, you can also use a self-rising flour if you have that on hand, in which case you're just going to omit the baking powder and the salt, and just use that self-rising flour, because essentially self-rising flour is this. It's flour with baking powder and salt already mixed in. So 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. We'll put that in. Then you're gonna add some garlic. The original recipe that I've used calls for fresh garlic. I personally found that from a texture standpoint, I wanted a dried garlic instead, just because it's a little less noticeable in terms of the feel in your mouth. You're not getting like actual chunks of garlic, you're just getting the flavor. So if you're gonna use fresh garlic, you can probably use a little bit more, but in this situation with the dried, I'm using 1.5 teaspoons or a half tablespoon. All right, so I'm just gonna give that a quick mix. And then I've got 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and so that's gonna go in there. I generally just keep unsalted butter on hand. So if you have salted, you might want to put a little bit less salt in your dough, but it's not going to make that huge of a difference, so not to worry if you don't. All right, so we're going to put that in there, and then for our big ingredient, with beer, when you go to cook with that, depending upon what your taste preference is, if you are not a huge fan of beer, I would suggest going for something lighter like a Canadian or a Coors. If you enjoy beer, you're probably going to have different ones on hand, but just keep in mind, the stronger the beer, the stronger the flavor will be in your bread. So if you don't like beer, go with something light. If you're wanting something a little bit more powerful, try different beers. Go with a pale ale. Go, try a stout if you really want to. That could make something really tasty for you. So get creative with it. That's the whole purpose of this. So we're gonna do 12 ounces, which is like a 355 ml can, and we're just gonna put that in there. You can always save the last few drops for yourself if you want. All right, so we're just gonna mix that up. Now, contrary to the last bread item that I showed you how to make, this one we're not gonna need. It's gonna be a little bit stickier, and that is totally fine. We want it to look like that because we're not actually gonna let this rise like we would a normal bread. All of that's gonna happen in the oven. Again, despite there being yeast in the beer itself, it's not gonna need to be worked with in the same way that you would with a normal quick yeast that you would use. All right. So basically you're just gonna keep mixing this until there is no more flour visible. Ooh, already I smell that garlic. All right. So you'll probably be able to see a little bit here that it is sticky. It doesn't look like a traditional dough that you would use for bread. Again, not to worry about that. All right, so we're gonna scrape down the sides of our bowl because we wanna make sure that we get as much of that into our bread pan as possible. All my dishes. Got my bread pan. Feel free, you can just butter it or spray it with spray oil. You all know my love of parchment paper. You probably are thinking that I have stock in it. I do not. I just enjoy using it. This, again, it's just gonna lift it out so much easier for me. So I put a little bit of cornmeal down in the bottom. That's, again, just because I wanna give it a little bit more crunch and texture on the bottom of the pan. Not necessary, especially if you're not a fan of cornmeal or you don't have it. So feel free, you can put that in, you don't need to. Your call. We're gonna take our pan, we will put our bread mix in there. And again, scrape out that bowl as best as possible. And then all we're gonna do is just smooth it out. Oops. As best as possible here. You wanna try and make sure that you're getting it into all the corners. Once again, don't be alarmed by the stickiness of it. It's going to be a little bit tricky to work with because it's wanting to form together, but it's also quite sticky. So it's going to take a little bit of work to get it where you want it to go. That is it. I'll show you from over top so you can see what it looks like. All we're gonna do is we're gonna put this in the oven right away, preheated oven, 375 degrees. We're gonna put it in for 45 minutes. You got yourself a bread. So we'll finish this off, get it in the oven, and you're gonna have bread in no time. All right, so we have our finished bread here. It was in the oven for about 45 minutes. One of the best ways to tell whether bread is done is if you tap on it, it should have a bit of a hollow sound to it. So with this, plain and simple, just put it in the pan and bake it off. So you can see our parchment just pulls it out nice and easily. You're gonna wanna let it cool a little bit before cutting it. Then once you've got it, there you'll see our bread. So again, a nice, quick, easy one to do. No yeast, just use your beer instead.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I put some butter on it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.